Sometimes when we study the period and we think back, we think, and we do hear this. I hear our opponents say, well, there's nobody like Madison or Adams anymore. But that's not who made the revolution. Regular people made the revolution. And so my favorite story from the revolution is about a regular person. His name was Captain Levi Preston. Preston fought in the Continental Army. He was at the battles where the shot was heard around the world, Lexington and Concord. Nobody talked to Captain Preston about his experiences in the war until 1843, long time after the revolution is over. There's a young historian by the name of Mellon Chamberlain. He's traveling around the country. He's collecting the oral histories of the last remaining Minutemen. And I want you to think about this. That's old, especially for back then. I mean, we all know people in their late 80s, early 90s now. Back then, that was ancient. That was like Methuselah ancient. Average life expectancy was 54, so somebody who was in their late 80s, 90s, almost impossible. So Chamberlain realized if he didn't collect these histories, they would cease to exist. There's no YouTube, right? No Walkman, no tape recorder, so you have to actually meet these people face to face and write down what they say. So this is what Chamberlain was doing. And he happens across Captain Levi Preston in North Carolina, where he has long since retired. And he asks him a series of questions about the causes of the American Revolution. Chamberlain's asking these questions from a certain premise. He believes at the time that he understood the causes for the Revolutionary War. I think most of us believe the same thing. We probably went to school, we learned our history about the Revolutionary War. And so you will recognize this series of questions as the things that we believe caused the Revolutionary War. He asked him about the Stamp Act. He said, did you go out and fight that day to face off against the Redcoats because you were so outraged by having to place stamps on every document? It was really a hidden tax and just an outrageous imposition on your freedom. And Preston said, stamps? The governor locked them in the armory and I'm sure I never bought one of them. Okay, I always heard about the Stamp Act, but apparently it didn't have any effect on Captain Levi Preston. He then asked him about the tax on tea. He said the tea tax was just outrageous and it was taxation without representation, and I'm sure you were outraged by that. And he said, son, I was a farmer. We drank coffee. We never drank any tea. Boys did dump it in the harbor. That was pretty good. That's all he knew about the tea tax, right? He was not outraged by the tax on tea. It had zero effect on him. Just an average American. This is what he thinks about the Revolutionary. Chamberlain's a little bit confused because he's pretty sure he's learned all this stuff in school. He knows what caused the Revolutionary War. Here's a captain in the Continental Army telling him he didn't know about any of that stuff. So he asks him about the great revolutionary writers. Now you can be sure Mellon Chamberlain, a school teacher, he's read all these people. So he asks him about Thomas Paine and Burke and all the great revolutionary writers, and he said, those men you speak of, I've never heard of them. We didn't read any of that. We read the Bible and the Almanac Psalms. That's all we read. I mean, imagine this. Everything he believes about the war is proving to be not true, as told by somebody who actually fought in the original battles. So he goes big and he says, oh, I suppose it was just British tyranny. You were just sick and tired of the heavy hand of British tyranny. And he says, never felt a whit of it. Okay, now I don't know about you guys, that's everything I learned in school, everything about the causes of the Revolutionary War in America. And yet here's a guy that was a captain in the Revolutionary Army who had a family, who had a farm, and put everything at risk to go fight the Redcoats, which is crazy, by the way. Put that in context. That's like me saying, hey, by the way, there's a battalion of Marines coming to the Capitol today, so bring your firearms, we're going to have a fight. Right? This is the most well-trained, well-fed, motivated, decorated fighting force in the history of the world. And a bunch of farmers went out and fought them. So think about that contextually. So he asks him, well, I don't understand. What was it? What would cause you to go out and fight that fight? You had everything to lose. Why would you do it? And he said what I think is the most succinct summary of the political philosophy of the American Revolution ever stated, then until the present time. And he said this: when we went out to fight them Redcoats, we meant only one thing. We had always governed ourselves, and we always intended to. Them Redcoats, they intended that we shouldn't. That's it. It's not complicated. It's not sophisticated. It's not intellectual or worldly. It's not a great speech. It's not a catch line. It's something that was deep inside Levi Preston. And it's deep inside every one of you. Oh, yeah. It's deep inside the American DNA. This is why we are so uncomfortable, because we actually have the audacity to believe that we have the right to govern ourselves. We're a self-governing people. You know where that came from? I started looking into where that came from. It's kind of weird. Like, that's just new in all of human history. Self-governing people. I think the only place really in all of human history recorded that you find a self-governing people is in the Judges period in the Old Testament. Right? Choose judges from among yourselves. There weren't really rulers, there were judges, and they voluntarily submitted to that authority. But I think there's no other period in human history where people actually, regular people actually ruled themselves. So I started looking at that history. Somebody asked me once, what's the time period between the Mayflower Compact and the beginning of the American Revolution? I said this in the committee hearing, what that time period was. I didn't know what that time period, I had a zero in my head, like there was a blank. It's 158 years between Jamestown and the American Revolution. 5 generations. I thought, well, something had to happen in that time that was really important. That's when it all happened. So what happened? And I started to look at the history books, and there was nothing. There's almost no histories written about that time period. So is that